Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar topic is Tenant Eviction and Repairs, Lucrative Home-Based Businesses, provided by the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County. Today's topic is going to be discussed and shared by both Attorney at Law's DaVatrice Lindsey and Amy Pettway. Thank you both for joining us today. And at this moment, I'm going to give Amy and DaVatrice the opportunity to speak and give them the microphone so they can be able to join us. So thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Mario.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, DaVatrice, for both joining us today.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get started. First, where the technical issues on my end, I am the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach.
Attorney Pettway will begin with the presentation, and then I'll pick up where she leaves off, and I will proceed with the lucrative home-based business portion.
Thank you very much.
Can everyone hear me?
Amy, if you could possibly speak a little bit into the microphone or use that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, is that better?
Absolutely, 100% better. Thank you for joining us today, Amy.
Thank you. I'm really sorry about that. I tested everything just before we got on. I appreciate your patience. So again, my name is Amy Pettway, and I'm one of the attorneys with the Community Economic Development Project of the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this webinar on tenant evictions and repairs and how to start and maintain a lucrative home-based business during COVID-19. This webinar is being brought to you by the Community Economic Development Project. And on behalf of the Legal Aid Society, we hope that you and your families are safe. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to give some background on the Community Economic Development Project and what we do. CED's mission is twofold. One, we provide and secure access to safe and affordable housing for low-income residents in Palm Beach County. Secondly, we provide tools to small for-profit startup businesses in economically depressed communities, and we hope to strengthen and stabilize them. Next slide, please. Before we have a discussion on the, I'm having a little delay, Mario. All right, I'll start with the evictions during the coronavirus slide. Evictions during the coronavirus is going to be a little different because of the problems with health-related issues in the spread. During ordinary times, evictions are governed by Florida Statute 83. Currently, we are under a few executive orders by the President, by the Governor, by the Florida Supreme Court, and by Palm Beach County courts. Florida Statute Section 83 governs the process that residential landlords and tenants take during an eviction proceeding. If a landlord wants to evict a tenant for non-payment of rent, the statute requires that notice be sent, delivered, or posted at the residence. And the notice has to indicate that the tenant must pay rent or vacate the premises within 3 days. The 3 days does not include weekends or holidays. However, currently, the eviction process, the one we just described, is temporarily altered due to the following emergency orders. Next slide, please. On April 2nd, Governor DeSantis issued an executive order suspending and tolling any statute providing for an eviction cause of action in the state for non-payment of residential rent for 45 days. So that deadline would have expired on May 18th. However, on May 14th, the governor gave us an additional 15 days, making the deadline for landlords to begin filing lawsuits for eviction for non-payment of rent on Tuesday, June 2nd. Two important aspects of this executive order. Firstly, the suspension of the filing of eviction lawsuits until June 2nd applies only to cases of non-payment of rent. Any other violations of the lease, like having a pet when it's prohibited, or having a visitor for an extended period of time, must be cured in order to avoid eviction. Secondly, the suspension only covers residences, not commercial rentals. So if you are facing eviction from property that you use for business purposes, this executive order will not apply. Next slide, please. The Florida Supreme Court and Palm Beach County courts also addressed the concern about evictions for non-payment of rent. The current court orders prevent a tenant from being evicted between April 2nd and May 29th. The note here is a little different for writs of possession, which are covered under this executive order, and eviction lawsuits, which were covered by the executive order from the governor. In this case, the stay is for writs of possession only. A writ is a directive or a command by the court to do something. So if a landlord has already won the eviction lawsuit and is holding a judgment, then the sheriff cannot carry out the writ of possession until after May 29th. This is true for Palm Beach County and all Florida residents. Next slide. On March 27th, President Trump, through Congress, enacted the CARES Act. This places a 120-day moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent for covered properties. Covered properties are those that receive federal subsidies or are secured by a federally backed mortgage loan or a federally backed multifamily mortgage loan. This is good news for tenants who live in covered properties because it means that landlords cannot seek late rent, late fees, or penalties until the first business day after Saturday, July 25th, the 120th day. After July 25th, the landlord must provide a 30-day notice of non-payment of rent before filing an eviction lawsuit. So to summarize, the CARES Act prevents a landlord from seeking past due rent, related fees to that, in court until Tuesday, August 25th. Next slide. So here is a list of what covered properties include under the CARES Act. You'll notice that they're broken into two sections. The top is what we call participating programs, and those include public housing, Section 8 housing, choice voucher, and project-based Section 8. The other category, federally backed mortgage loans or federally backed multifamily mortgage loans include FHA, HUD, Department of Agriculture, RHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. Next slide, please. Concerning the CARES Act, there's also some good news for those of us who reside in Palm Beach County. On May 13th, the Chief Judge of Palm Beach County Courts issued an order which offers some safeguards to covered tenants. The order requires covered landlords to attach a verified Landlord CARES Act information sheet to the eviction complaint. This order is in effect for any eviction lawsuits filed on or after March 27th. Why is this important? Because it requires covered landlords to understand and comply with the CARES Act. It puts a covered tenant on notice that they live in covered property, and it helps judges to know how to rule on these special kinds of eviction cases, keeping the 120-day moratorium in mind. Next slide. Why does the Landlord CARES Act information sheet, what does it request? The Landlord CARES Act information sheet covers 4 issues. Firstly, the plaintiff must clearly state who he is and that he has a right to possession. So that would either be the owner of the property, the landlord, or the managing company. Secondly, the residential address must clearly be stated in the sheet. Third and fourth are what we saw on, I think, 2 or 3 slides before. What kind of covered property is it? Is it in a participating program, or is the property under a federally backed mortgage loan or federally backed multifamily mortgage loan? This order will expire on August 25th because that's the deadline for, that's the starting date for when landlords can file lawsuits in court without the CARES Act protection. Next slide, please. What happens if the landlord does not attach the Landlord CARES Act information sheet? Well, the presiding judge over the eviction case can order the landlord to produce it before entering a final judgment or default final judgment against the covered tenant. The executive order requires the clerk to provide the information sheet to the filing party and to have it available by website. This is actually a court order, not executive order. The other obvious question is, if the CARES Act already prevents covered landlords from suing for back rent and late fees until August 25th, why do we even need a Palm Beach County court-ordered Landlord CARES Act information sheet? Because the CARES Act is a federal regulation. Local landlords may not know about it, they may not know that it applies to their property, or they may choose to ignore it. Next slide, please. So those are the executive orders that guide the eviction process during the coronavirus pandemic. Now we're going to turn to the Florida statute again and the landlord's obligations. Whether we are in a pandemic or not, a landlord may never engage in the following prohibited practices. They include changing the locks, turning off the water, the electricity, or the gas, or removing tenants' personal property from the rental unit. If this is something that is occurring that you know about for someone in Palm Beach County, and it's happening without a writ of possession being issued, please contact us. We can assist you with seeking penalties That could include up to 3 months rent, reimbursements of costs, and attorney's fees. Next slide, please. Repairs during the coronavirus. The process of reporting repairs during the coronavirus pandemic is the same as reporting them under everyday circumstances. However, tenants are strongly advised to report life safety conditions or those issues that make the rental home uninhabitable, since we are in the midst of the pandemic. So if it's not a significant problem, the repairs should wait until things are safer. Next slide, please. Here are the landlord's obligations to maintain rental premises under the statute. And again, this is the same statute, section 8351. Note that the obligations in red include complying with applicable building, housing, and health codes. Where there are none, landlords must maintain items 1B in habitable condition. And you'll see that they include things like maintaining the roof and windows, doors, floors, steps, porches, anything foundational and structural, and those repairs must be made and placed in reasonable working condition. If the rental is other than a single family home or a duplex, the landlord has the additional responsibility to exterminate rats, mice, roaches, ants, wood-destroying organisms, and bed bugs. Next slide, please. Some of the more common uninhabitable conditions that we see with the Community Economic Development Project include mold from water and plumbing leaks, inoperable fixtures and outlets, and pest control. Next slide, please. So how exactly should repairs be reported? The following outline gives you an understanding of what the statute requires, which means it's very important for tenants to follow the rules exactly. Firstly, the tenant should put the demand to repair in writing with the current date. Next, in the letter, the repairs that need to be made should be specified. And again, those are going to be the kinds of repairs that we just talked about in Florida Statute Section 83.51. Next, in the letter, the tenant should provide 7 days to repair. So that means you'll count the 7 days and provide that actual deadline within the letter. Next, the tenant needs to provide that he or she will withhold rent unless repairs are made by the deadline. Finally, the letter needs to be sent via certified mail or some manner that proves signature. And the tenant should keep a copy for their records. Next slide, please. So what I have here is a sample letter. It is fictional person. My unit is the tenant. I'd like to give you 20, 25 seconds to go through the letter to see whether or not you can pick up on any errors that this tenant has made in the repairs statute based on what we just reviewed. So I'll give you 20 seconds. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are 5 errors in the letter. Firstly, today's date is missing. The tenant must put the date on the letter so that we know and the tenant knows when it was sent. Secondly, the letter is sent by email. but it should be sent by certified mail, return receipt, or through a carrier that provides proof of signature upon receipt. Thirdly, the right to withhold rent arises from giving the landlord 7 days to repair. This tenant has listed 5 days to repair. That's short of the statute. Fourth, the tenant goes on to change the deadline from 5 days to 6 days, when it should actually be 7 days to repair. And lastly, the tenant informs the landlord that she'll move out if repairs are not made. Withholding rent is the appropriate remedy, not moving out. Next slide, please. When can you withhold rent? When the landlord does not make, quote, reasonable efforts to correct, end quote. That's under Florida Statute Section 8356. The next question becomes, what is reasonable? And the answer depends on the circumstances. Again, if we're in a pandemic and there's some water leak or roof issue or something that substantially impacts the habitability, then it should be done within that 7-day period, if not sooner. But if it's things that can wait, or if we're not in a pandemic, and reasonable steps have been taken by the landlord to at least call a plumber, schedule a plumbing appointment, have the plumber come in, but perhaps it was rescheduled, something to that effect, those are reasonable steps. What would not be reasonable would depend on the circumstances. So if you can't figure that out, we encourage you to give us a call and we can assist you with it. If you have to withhold any rent, how much should you withhold? The statute requires that rent shall be reduced by an amount in proportion to the loss of the rental value caused by the non-compliance. We will certainly help you with that, and in many cases, if it's something substantial, generally speaking, you may be able to hold the entire or withhold the entire amount of rent, depending on what the circumstances are. Next slide, please. What if you need help paying your bills or your rent? You may be able to get temporary help from the county. First, you would call 211 to find out what agencies are available and are providing rental assistance. If you live in Palm Beach County, you can call the Palm Beach County Eviction Assistance line on the screen. Or if you live in the city of West Palm Beach, you can call their eviction protection program at that number. Next slide, please. Other resources include Palm Beach County Office of Equal Opportunity. This is if you believe you are the victim of housing discrimination. The Office of Equal Opportunity can assist you with assessing and helping to file a case or claim against the landlord. You may also call the Fair Housing Unit with the Legal Aid Society or Community Economic Development if you live in one of our designated areas. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is DaVatrice Lindsey, and I'm the attorney with the Neighborhood Entrepreneurial Law Project, which is also known as NELP. It was launched in 2018 for individuals and for-profit small businesses. It provides residents of the Palm Beach County area the tools and knowledge to be successful in starting and or owning their small businesses. Also, we supply limited financial assistance for business registration, logo design, home occupation affidavit, and more for eligible applicants only. And we furnish webinars and podcasts regarding important business topics. The podcast that we have coming up is Why Should Small Businesses Obtain Copyrights? It will be released on May 27th at 2 p.m. and we did include the website there for you. Also, if you have any questions that you would like to have included in the podcast, please email those questions to jrock@legalaid.org. pbc.org. Again, that's jrock@legalaid, pbc for palmbeachcounty.org. Next slide, please. I'm going to cover starting a lucrative home-based business. Due to the pandemic, people have lost wages, completely lost their jobs, and or may be in need of supplemental income. As a result, starting a home-based business may be a good way to turn that skill or hobby into income. Next slide, please. The Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County can assist you in the following ways: with deciding the business structure that suits your business the best, picking a business name that is not in use, registering your business with the state, obtaining a federal employee identification number, opening company bank accounts, and obtaining business licenses and permits. To the right, you'll see a list of different businesses that are lucrative right now despite the pandemic. They are website tester, online tutor, mass creator and distributor, photographer, recipe creator, translator, and designer. Next slide, please. We want you to choose the business structure that works best for you. However, the business structure that I'll be covering is a limited liability company, which is also known as LLC. A limited liability company is a hybrid type of legal structure that provides the limited liability features of a corporation and the tax efficiencies and operational flexibility of a partnership. The owners of an LLC are referred to as members. Depending on the state, the members can consist of a single individual, one owner, two or more individuals, corporations, or other LLCs. Unlike shareholders in a corporation, LLCs are not taxed as a separate business entity. Instead, all profits and losses are passed through the business to each member of the LLC. LLC members report profits and losses on their personal federal tax returns, just like the owners of a partnership would. Next slide, please. So keep in mind that the Florida Supreme Court held that a court may order a judgment debtor to surrender all right, title, and interest in a debtor's single member LLC to satisfy an outstanding judgment. Practitioners were thereafter advised to form limited liability companies with multiple members whenever possible. So basically, you are afforded the protections of the LLC structure. However, if you're a single member LLC, the corporate veil can be pierced and the creditor can come after you. Next slide, please. Now we'll go over registering your LLC. I will review the filing options, payment options, processing dates, fees, and articles of organization, focusing mainly on the mandatory fields. Next slide, please. In regards to filing options, you have three. You can file online with a credit card. You can also complete the fillable PDF form using your computer. So you would print it, you would sign it, and then mail it to the Division of Corporations with the required payment. And then you can also print the PDF form by completing it in blue and black ink, sign it, and then mail it to the Division of Corporations with the required payment. Next slide, please. Your payment options are as follows. Please make all checks payable to the Florida Department of State. Check and money orders must be payable in U.S. currency drawn from a U.S. bank. Credit cards are accepted, are MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and American Express. Next slide, please. I included this example of the processing days just to give you something to go off of. But basically what you want to do is pull the processing days before you register. Most people opt to register online, and it looks like it takes plus or minus 2 to 3 business days. So for example, if you submit your online registration on Thursday, you'll probably receive your registration Monday evening. Next slide, please. The fees that are involved are as follows. Articles of organization, $100. Registered agent designation, $25. Certified copy, which is optional, $30. Certificate of status, which is also optional, $5. So you're looking at a total of $160 if you go with all of these options. However, you're only required to go with the first 2, so that would be $125. Next slide, please. Okay, in regards to the articles of organization, the mandatory fields are the LLC name, principal place of business address, mailing address, registered agent name and address, registered agent signature, manager authorized representative, effective date, signature, and correspondence name and email. Next slide, please. For the LLC name, please ensure that the name is distinguishable on the records of the Department of State. So do a preliminary search by name before submitting your document, and I included the link to search. The name must include limited liability company, LLC, or L.C. Keep in mind that if you do choose a different business structure, that you'll need to follow the rules accordingly. Next slide, please. The addresses that are required are the principal place of business address, the mailing address, and the registered agent name and address. For the principal place of business address, the street address of the LLC's principal office. The mailing address is the LLC's mailing address if it is different from the principal address, and PO boxes are acceptable. And lastly, the registered agent name and address, the individual or legal entity that will accept service of process on behalf of the business entity is the registered agent. A business entity with an active Florida filing or registration may serve as a registered agent. An entity cannot serve as its own registered agent. However, an individual or principal associated with the business may serve as a registered agent. The registered agent must have a physical street address in Florida, so PO boxes are not permitted. Next slide, please. There are two signatures that are required, which are the registered agent signature and the signature for the application overall. For the registered agent signature, the registered agent must sign the application. The signature confirms the agent is familiar with and accepts the obligations. If a business entity is designated as the agent, a principal individual of that entity must sign to accept the obligations. If you're filing online, the registered agent must type their name in the signature block. Electronic signatures have the same legal effect as original signatures. Keep in mind, typing someone's name or signature without their permission constitutes forgery. And for the signature overall, it must be signed by at least one person acting as the authorized representative. If filing online, the authorized representative must type their name in the signature block. Electronic signatures have the same legal effect as original signatures. Next slide, please. I included the effective date just because I want to make sure that it's clear, it's not mandatory. Basically, most people leave this blank because the effective date, if you leave it blank, begins on the date that the division of corporation receives and files your articles, unless you specify otherwise. If you specify otherwise, make sure that that date is no more than 5 business days prior to or 90 days after the date of that the documents are received by the office. Next slide, please. Okay, regarding the correspondence name and email, please provide a valid email address. If filing online, the filing acknowledgement and certification, if any, will be emailed to this address. All future email communications will be sent to this address, so please keep this email address up to date. Next slide, please. Again, you heard from earlier, Attorney Amy Pettway. I'm DaVatrice Lindsey, and we are with the Community Economic Development with the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County Incorporated. We're located at 423 Fern Street, Suite 200, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33401. And there are 2 ways to apply for legal assistance. You can call our hotline at 561-655-8944, extension 148, or you can complete an online intake at www.legalaidpbc.org. Again, that's www.legalaidpbc.org. Thank you.
Thank you, DaVatrice. That's, again, Attorney at Law Amy Pettway and DaVatrice Lindsey from the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County. Thank you both for your presentations. If you have any questions for either Amy or DaVatrice, please put those questions into the chat box. I will pick them up and I will read them to them at this moment. Okay, thank you again for joining. We have one question in the chat. Can we get a copy of this presentation? Yes, we will have all our webinars for live webinars for legal aid. We will have them in our library, and as soon as we get them into our recorded library, we will issue them to anyone that is interested in receiving a copy. So thank you again for asking that question and also for joining us today for our webinar.